morning. How we doing? Yeah, good. Sorry, we had some tech people that are out of town, and we need to make new rules about, like, I don't know if there's a sign-out sheet of how many people are allowed to be gone at a time or something like that. We might be implementing that. I don't know how that works. You get like a hall pass situation, and you're allowed to go for a certain amount of time, but only so many people at a time. So we're glad you're here this morning. We have so many cool things going on. Yesterday we spent the whole day here with the Trinity Marketplace, which was right out here in the lawn, and getting to meet people there. And we've been, through almost every weekend, we have events where we're meeting with people, where we're partnering with local organizations, where we're serving in different places, and we're just getting to know people. And one of the things that's been really interesting is this specific topic that we're going to talk about today is doubt. And really, it's amazing how that resonates with people. First of all, how it resonates with people, and secondly, how they look at me weird when I say we're going to talk about it in a church. We're going to talk about doubts. Like, they look at me like, so you're not like a real church then, huh? I'm like, they see that in us. When Marie and I were dating, so we'd been dating for about 2.5 years, and one of us was getting really starting to get to that place where she was like, are we going to get married or not? Like, what's going on here? And we've been dating for 2.5 years. We've been talking about marriage. I mean, that wasn't like totally out of the question. It was just one of those things where, like, some of us were not as quick to the game to figure that out, that should be like where the dating was going. We weren't as bright about these things. But after a couple of years, Marie did get to the place where she was like, okay, so what are we doing here? Like, are we going to get married or not? So we talked about this, and we were on the same page. We wanted to get married. And so there was a specific night. It was right before Christmas break. And right before Christmas break, we were together, and we were going to go separate ways for Christmas break. She was going to go to her parents' house. I was going to fly out to go see my family, and that was the way I was going to go. Now, we were going to drive to her parents together, which at the time, her parents lived in Virginia. We were down here in Florida. It's about a 12-hour drive together. I was going to drive her to her parents, and I was going to fly out from there to go see my family, right? So that was our plan for the next day. But the night before that, we hung out with some friends. We were out that night, and I drove Marie back to her house that night. Now, we get to her house, and she's quiet. And I can tell something's wrong, And because I'm a guy, and I'm really intuitive. And I was like, wow, I think something's wrong. She's like, yeah, she was pretty upset. There were like tears, like almost like welling up in her eyes as we sat together and so we talked. And we were talking about this. I said, what's wrong? What's going on? She goes, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And I was like, well, can you just tell me, just give me a glimpse. What's happening? What's going on in that little mind of yours? Like, tell me what's happening. And she wouldn't do it. She was like, no, I don't want to talk about it. And finally she said, okay, here's the thing. I don't want to pressure you, because I don't know if you know this or not. I am younger than Marie, like a lot, like 2 years. I let her know that quite a bit. I'm a lot significantly younger. She will be 1 million before I'm 1 million, okay? So I'm younger. And she said, I don't want to pressure you or anything. I know you're younger, and I don't want to make this happen. Now, I was like 21, and she was all of 23. But she was like, I don't want to pressure you or anything. And I know, and she was like, but I just, I was really hoping that I would be engaged by this point. I was like, well, why is that? And she was like, well, tomorrow we're going on Christmas break, and I'm going to go see my mom, and I don't get to see my mom all the time. And I want to go, I want to spend time with her. I want to dress shop with her and look for things for a wedding. And she was like, and I'm not going to do that until I have a ring on my finger. I'm not going to start that preemptively. And she was like, how often do I get to do that? How often do I get to go spend time with my mom and dream about a wedding and think about that? And she's like, I just really thought, that at this point I would have a ring on my finger. Now, what Marie didn't know was just earlier that day, I had called her parents and asked them this question: hey, what if I proposed to your daughter tomorrow? And to be completely honest, her dad had been asking me, when are you going to propose? Like, he was on her side. So it wasn't much of a question. Like, it wasn't a shock to them. In fact, the first time I met him, he was like, after we were dating, he was like, hey, Kevin, whenever you're ready, man, just pull the trigger, So I had permission, but I just called them. I said, tomorrow, what if instead of us coming up to see you and me flying out tomorrow, what if we stay down here for an extra day, and what if I propose to your daughter? And they were like, that'd be great. She didn't know this. She didn't know this was coming the next day. She didn't know that the next day I had an entire scavenger hunt literally across the state of Florida that was designed for her from people all along our paths, people that we were both friends with, that were all along, like from churches, from school, from roommates, everybody across our collective paths that were going to be a part of a scavenger hunt the next day where she would get 9 different rings that she would put on 9 different fingers until the last ring that she would find me with the last clue, and she would put that last ring on, which would be her engagement ring. She didn't know this was coming. She's sitting there in tears, and she looks at me, and I said, as we sit there together and she's in tears, she says to me, she says, I just was hoping that by now I'd be engaged. And I said, Marie, it's coming sooner than you think. And she got even more teary, and she looked at me and she goes, you keep saying that, and I don't believe you anymore. And I just remember that moment of her not believing me and me being completely insensitive and kind of laughing at the situation. But I just remember this moment of, you keep saying that, and I don't believe you anymore. And have you ever been in that spot? Maybe this whole doubt thing, maybe with your faith, maybe with religion, maybe with the church. Maybe there's been things, maybe you grew up in the church like I did, and you grew up in this, you've been a part of this since like the day you were born, you know all about the church, you've been a part of it for so long that there comes a point sometimes, maybe it was when you went to college, maybe it was when you first kind of moved out on your own, maybe it was when you started hanging out with different friends, that there came this point where you started to go, I've heard this a lot, and I don't know if I believe this anymore. Or maybe you're on the flip side of that. Maybe you're somebody who didn't grow up in the church. And maybe you've looked at the church, maybe you've looked at this faith thing, this religion thing for a long time from the outside looking in, and you see the hypocrisy, you see the train wreck that it is, you see how church is not always all it's cracked up to be, and you see that and you go, they keep saying that, but I don't believe them anymore. There's tough times that happen in life, there's things that happen in life where suddenly we stop and we start to think, I don't know if I believe this anymore. You keep saying it, but I don't know if I buy it. And maybe that's where you're at. Maybe that's something that you've struggled with. And if you have, the whole goal of today, to be honest, you might walk out of here and be like, that wasn't much of a sermon. And it may not be much of a sermon. I just want to set up where we're going for the next few weeks and really talk about this idea of doubt. Because again, it's something we hide it. We act like it can't happen. We act like there's something wrong with us if we have doubts about our faith. Specifically, if we have doubts about Jesus, or we have doubts about religion, if we have doubts about the church. And to be honest, I don't know how you can't have doubts. I don't even understand a world where you don't. Like, this is not an easy thing to swallow. We're asking you to buy into the most miraculous story that's ever been told, and you're just supposed to go along with that? And just be like, yep, that makes total sense. It does not make total sense. None of it makes sense. And if I can do anything else today, I just want to put us at ease with the idea that maybe doubt isn't a bad thing. What if doubt isn't necessarily something that is a negative thing in our religion, in our faith, in our personal lives, in our spiritual lives? What if it's not a negative thing? What if it's just part of the byproduct of faith? I don't know anybody that has strong faith that has not had strong doubts at some point. I honestly don't, and me included. And today I want to look at this story of this guy, John the Baptist. Now, you may know John the Baptist. He was John the Baptist. Doesn't mean that he was a Baptist like we think of Baptists today, like he didn't have a bigger Bible than you, or or preach with an awesome preacher voice, like maybe what you're used to in the Baptist church or whatever. He wasn't a Baptist like that. It was just, he was a baptizer. He baptized people. That was like his profession. So they called him John the Baptist, okay? So it'd be like for instance, like there's Alexander the Great, right? Yeah, or Attila the Hun, right? Yeah, or Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, we all know that one really well, unfortunately. Yeah, not a real character, just by the way. That is fiction, okay? But yeah, so he's John the Baptist. That's what he is. He's John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is this guy who's actually Jesus' cousin. He's related to Jesus here on earth. Like, he's his cousin. That you would think this guy is the guy. Like, he's related to Jesus. He actually has been prophesied about himself. He's kind of a big deal. And John is friends with Jesus. And it says this in Luke chapter 7, and we'll be in Luke chapter 7 most of the morning here. It says this, when the men came to Jesus, they said, John the Baptist, this same John the Baptist sent us to ask. They're asking this of Jesus. Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Now, this is like kind of a slap in the face. So Jesus, are you the Messiah? Are you the one that's supposed to come? Or should we wait around and keep watching for somebody else? Like that's kind of a big question. And John sends his disciples. These are his disciples. He has his own disciples. John the Baptist sends his disciples to go ask Jesus this question. Are you the one who's to come, or should we expect somebody else? It's like a bad blind date situation where you show up and you're like, oh, you're the date. Are you sure you're the one, or should I wait around a little bit longer and see if somebody else shows up? This is what's happening. There's some serious questions here, and John is asking them directly of Jesus, are you the one who is to come, or should we wait? Is there somebody else? Now that's crazy. You got Jesus' cousin asking this question of his own cousin about if he's the one or not. We see John, we'll back up just for a second, but we see John and Jesus meet for the first time in John chapter 1. We see them meet. Now, I'm sure they met at family reunions and other things before this, but this is somewhere they did meet. We actually see one of the first meetings they ever had. And it says this in John chapter 1. It says, John says, I baptize with water, John replied, but among you stands one who you do not know. He is the one who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. He's talking about this other one. Who's the one to come? He's saying there's this other one who's going to come. It's not me. There's somebody else that's going to come, and he's going to be greater than I. I'm not even worthy to untie his shoes. And then it says, the next day, John saw Jesus, his cousin. He sees Jesus coming towards him, and he says, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is the one I meant when I said, a man who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me. He's saying, this is the man. I was saying there was going to be somebody greater than me. This is the one. Notice he's saying right here, this is the one, but he just said, are you the one, or should we wait for somebody else? Sounds like John was very confident right here, right? Like he's very confident in this moment that Jesus is the one. Right? He's proclaiming this to people like, this is the guy. This is the guy I was telling you about. This is Jesus. But suddenly we see him send his disciples to Jesus and say, wait, are you the guy? Or I just want to double check real quick. Just need to, make sure that we're on the same page. Are you the guy or not? What happens to John that makes him have this doubt? See, what happens is at this time, there was a king. His name was Herod. And Herod had two sons. There was Herod Philip and Herod Antipas. Now, he kind of had this George Foreman situation where he kept naming his kids like after himself, apparently. So there was Herod Philip and Herod Antipas. And Herod Philip married a woman named Herodias, which also has Herod in it. And it's getting a little creepy at this point. But they had their celebrity couple name figured out, which was nice, because Herodias had all of it in it. So Herodias marries Herod Philip, right? And they're married and things are going well. Well, then Herod Antipas, the other Herod, comes over and he meets this wife of his brother Herod Philip. And he's like, ooh, I like that Herodias gal. And he talks her into divorcing his brother and marrying him. It's a good family dynamic they've got going on. It's really, really good thing. So what happens is after that, Herod, the grandfather, the father here, so we got Herod the dad, Herod the Great. He's the king. He likes Herodias too. Yeah, it's like a Game of Thrones episode here. I don't know. It's a disaster. So he's kind of into Herodias too. I don't know. It must be that name. Isn't that an attractive name? It must be something with that. So he's into Herodias too. But then he meets Herodias' daughter, his granddaughter, and he really likes her. And in fact, at a party, he has her dance for him. And he really likes the way she dances. So he tells her, I will give you anything you want. Now, John the Baptist, being John the Baptist, he's just going around living the baptizing life. The baptizing life didn't choose, he didn't choose the baptizing life. It chose him, right? And John's living the baptizing life, but he also kind of speaks out against this. And he calls them out for their crazy. And he's like, you guys, this is nuts. Like, stop doing all the things. Like, just stop all of it. It's like a Kardashian episode. Quit this situation. You got to stop. And he calls them out on it. He's like, this is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. And as he's telling them that, it turns out that Herod has granted this wish for his oddly incestuous granddaughter situation, and she gives him her request. Here's what I want for my one wish. I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter. What kind of family? So that's what she wants. She literally wants his head. And so Herod's like, well, I guess I told you that, granddaughter, that since you danced for me so well, I'll give you John the Baptist's head. So he has John the Baptist in prison. He brings him in, he puts him in prison, and it's obvious that John's going to die. And at this point, this is the moment in prison where John meets with his disciples, and that's when he sends them to go ask this question. Go ask Jesus if he's the one, or if I should be looking for somebody else. See, we don't always question things when they're good. We don't have as many doubts when things are going well. When something goes bad, and suddenly we're in this spot where we go, everything was going right, and now I'm stuck here. That's when we start to question things, especially in situations like John. John did the right thing, even. And sometimes we get so frustrated because God doesn't follow our formulas. And we did all the right things, we made all the right choices, we said all the right words, and still something bad happens. And we really start to have doubts. For me, a lot of you guys know this about me. But I grew up in it just was like the Cleaver house. Like, it was just this perfect existence of my family growing up. Like, we were just, it was, mom and dad. I had an older brother, an older sister, and then I was the youngest. And really our family was like the model family. Like, everything you saw, it was just like everything's perfect. How could things be wrong? We lived in the house that my dad built for us, and we had he drove his he got this at one point, this ugly Cadillac, but he drove this big Cadillac that was at least like 10 years too old to be cool, but he was proud of it, and my mom drove the station wagon that we could all fit in, and we just had that existence that was, everything was right. My dad was a pastor, and everybody thought he was really great and really admired him and respected him. And he really had done a great job in ministry. My mom was like the perfect little pastor's wife who, she made really good brownies, kind of thing. There was a section of time where she worked for Weight Watchers. It was the worst time of my life. But other than that, everything was pretty good, And we had this nice little existence. We went to Christian schools and we wore our uniforms. My dad was the president of the school that was attached to the church we went to. And so, we rode home with him. And while my mom was working for Weight Watchers, he would drive us through Burger King on the way home to make sure that we could actually eat something before we had to go have a chicken breast and broccoli again. And, we had this existence that was just so good. Like, everything was perfect. Everything was so right. And then we made this big move. And we moved from Daytona Beach, Florida, to Casper, Wyoming. Now, I can't explain really why that's ever a good idea. We moved to Casper, Wyoming. Most people still to this day, if I say I lived in Wyoming, they'll ask me, what state's that in? I'm like, no, it's not a territory anymore. It's a full-fledged state, guys. We moved to Wyoming. And my dad was working at this really large church there, and things were still really good, but suddenly he got really, really sick. And as he was getting sicker and sicker, and as his body it just was deteriorating right in front of us. And as he continued in this death spiral, he eventually died at 43 years old. I was 9 years old when he died. And I just remember thinking, as a 9-year-old, those questions where you go, he did everything right. We did everything right. And why would that happen? And you can't help but begin to have doubts. And you start asking the questions, don't you? Where you start with is God really good? Is God really there? And then, is God real? You can't help but ask those questions. You have no choice but to ask those questions. I remember having those questions of like, is this even real? Is anything that I've been brought up to believe, is anything that I've been, fed since the time I was a child, is any of that real? Does God even care that we exist? And if he does, why isn't he doing something about this? And then if he does, then why wouldn't he change this? And if he doesn't change it, then is he real? Is he even listening to us? Does he even pay attention? You start having those questions. And that's where John finds himself at this moment. He's going, I'm going to die for this. And he starts to question everything. He's going, are you real, Jesus? Is this really you? Are you paying attention at all? So he sends his disciples to go ask him this question. And I want to just look real quick at Jesus' response, because it's a really encouraging response. Jesus says this. It says, the men came to Jesus. They said, John the Baptist sent us to ask, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? And at that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the good news is proclaimed to the poor. So he's going, look what I'm doing. I'm doing all the things I was supposed to do. I am the Messiah. I am still doing good things. But you can't blame John for still being like, yeah, that's great you're doing that for all those people. Like, I'm still in prison. I don't know if you noticed or not. I'm still stuck over here. Could you come do a miracle over here where I'm at? Like, is that too hard to ask? And he leaves them there and he says, but look, I'm doing all the things. Now, Jesus in this moment is saying, I am still the Messiah. And what I love about John's question is that John, he doesn't necessarily question his faith. He really questions his doubts. There's a big difference there. But he sends these disciples and he says, not so much is there no good in the world? Is there no God in the world? What he asks is, I still believe there is a Messiah. I still believe there is good. I still believe there is hope. But are you the one for that? But he questions not what he knows. He knows that there's hope. He knows that there's redemption. He knows there's a Messiah. But he questions, are you the one? That's my doubt. And he asks this question. So Jesus does something really confusing and performs more miracles because it's really confusing. Miracles in general are confusing. And I don't know how you answer a question with more miracles. It was a very confusing time. So he does this. And then Jesus says these words, blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. That's a weird line, isn't it? But I think what Jesus is saying there, and we'll talk about this more next week, but he says basically, I don't expect you to get all this. I understand that a Messiah coming to earth through a virgin who's born just as all these prophecies declared, who has these miraculous powers, who dies and then is resurrected again, I understand that's a lot to deal with. I'm glad for those people that don't stumble on account of me because I'm a lot to deal with. I'm hard to handle. That's what he's saying there. He's saying, I understand it. I know this is a lot to deal with. And then he turns to it says this, the messengers left and Jesus began to speak to the crowd. He turns to the crowd. Here's what I love that Jesus does. And he says, what did you go out to the wilderness to see? He's talking about, did you guys go to see John? John the Baptist lived in the wilderness. Did you go out to see a reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No. Those who wear expensive clothes and indulge in luxury are in palaces. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes. He's talking about John. Yes, I tell you more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way for you. And then he says, I tell you, among those born of women, there is no one greater than John. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. Look at what he says. This guy, John, there's no one who's ever been born to a woman who's greater than John. So unless that baby who was born to Arnold Schwarzenegger in that movie Junior, Like, do you remember this moment? Like, yeah, where Arnold Schwarzenegger played a guy who was having a baby. Yeah, he went on to be a governor, by the way. You know, like, unless that baby was born to a man, he's saying everybody else who was born to a woman, which I'm pretty sure is just everybody, whoever was born to a woman, he's saying there's no greater person than John. He does not condemn him. See, church, that's where we would be right there. Right away, we would be like, oh, there's doubts? Oh, no, we can't talk about that right now. That person doesn't have strong enough faith. That person hasn't been trying hard enough. I've talked to people who that's their experience with church, is they're going through a hard time, and people just sit them down and say, you need to have more faith. You're just not praying hard enough. I just can't buy that. There's times where it's just hard. This story is so big. It involves so much. And the thing that I love about John is he asks the questions. I would say that Jesus is more excited about him asking the questions than he would be if he stopped talking to him altogether. That's the danger that we find ourselves in with doubt. If doubt at least continues the conversation, then that's worthwhile. That's a good benefit of the doubt. It's when our doubts stop the conversation. We got to remember, Jesus is not worried about us having everything right. Jesus is worried about having a relationship with us. And sometimes a relationship, it's somebody sitting next to you saying, you keep saying that and I don't believe you anymore. At least you're still in the conversation. At least you're still in the relationship. And so John sends this, and Jesus does not push him away. He does not say John doesn't believe enough. John doesn't have enough faith. He's just going through a tough time, that guy, and he'll get it back together. He doesn't do that. He turns to the crowd and says, there is no one greater than John, even in his doubts. And we're going to walk through this for the next few weeks, but the thing that I want us to be okay with is that this is okay. It's okay to not be okay. Jesus isn't shunning you. He is not upset with you. These are not negative things. These are actually things that I think he encourages because he wants a relationship. He wants a conversation. And over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about that in multiple areas. And there are so many stories. For those people that don't think that doubt's okay, there are so many stories in the Bible of this. So feel like you're in good company. Jesus' own cousin had them. Okay? I asked Andy this morning if she would sing a song, and it's by a band, and if you're a bluegrass person, it's by Nickel Creek, and I really love Nickel Creek. Now, I will be very clear. I'm not a country person. There's a big difference between bluegrass and country, okay? And I'm not this is from a bluegrass band. And I asked her to sing these words because I think they're so powerful. And just as we think about that, as you reflect on that, as you think about the things in your own life that maybe you're holding back from God, the things that you're not having a conversation with him about, but you're just holding them back, think about those as Andy sings these words, as we kind of just listen to the words and think about what they might mean for us, where you're at in this exact spot, in this exact moment. Think about that as over the next few weeks we really unpack this idea of doubt. We really spend time on what this could look like and what the things are that we're not having a conversation with God about because we're trying to hold them in. We're trying to keep them to ourselves. I'm going to pray, and you can just sit back and just take a listen as Andy sings. You'll see the words so you can kind of follow along and understand what it's about. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you that you're a God of just grace. God, I thank you that no matter when we have our doubts and we have things that are difficult to deal with, when we're stuck in difficult situations, when we go, hey, I've done everything right, and you're not holding up your end of the bargain, that you're not a God who shies away from that conversation. Rather, you're a God who engages that conversation. You're a God who still listens, who still cares, who still gets involved in our lives. God, I thank you that it seems like Jesus even understands that he's a lot to handle. And I thank you that he is. I thank you for the mystery of Jesus that's greater than what we could understand. And God, I pray that as we walk through this journey together, through this month, God, I just pray that you would speak to us individually. And God, if there are things that we're holding back, just let us turn them loose. Let us hand them over to you. Let us at least have those conversations that maybe we haven't had because we're scared, because we're afraid of what people will say or what you'll say. God, let us turn those over to you and have a real conversation with you. God, I pray that our doubt would not be something that holds